Hi everyone, and welcome to the Australasian Railway Association's webinar regarding antisocial behaviour on and around railways. My name is Emma Woods. I'm the Director of Corporate Services with the ARA, and I'm pleased to be the facilitator of today's panel discussion. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional landowners on which we meet. The ARA office is based in Canberra, so for me it's the Ngunnawal people. I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I'd also like to acknowledge and thank our sponsor and partner in our webinar program, Frauscher. We thank them for their ongoing support. It helps us deliver this program for you all today. In terms of a little bit of housekeeping before we kick off, this webinar is live. Our panelists are with us live and we aim to make it really interactive. So each of you on the line have the ability to ask questions. You have the ability to ask more than one question, and you can ask a question at any time throughout the session. I will monitor the questions and I'll do my best to cover off as many as I can throughout the session today. Now, as you can see, we're joined by 4 panelists today. They're all experts in the field of antisocial behaviour, and I will introduce them as they are displayed on the screen. So first up, we have Erin Parker. Erin is the Head of Customer Service with Keolis Downer on the Gold Coast. She's an experienced senior leader with more than 20 years experience in the tourism, hospitality and transport sectors. She's been with Keolis Downer Gold Coast since 2013, which I believe was just before they actually began operations. And she's got extensive operational performance knowledge, and she's really passionate about ensuring that the customer experience is integral within the company brand, culture and focus. Next up, we've got Gary. Gary Bevin is the Director of Security for Sydney Trains. He's got an extensive career in rail and law enforcement, and he's led security programs that have improved the customer journey time and overall customer experience. He's recently established Transport Marshals, and he's leading the COVID-safe customer behaviour program across all transport modes in New South Wales. Gary's also a champion of awareness and understanding of suicide. Next up, we've got Dr. Lyndel Bates. Lyndel is an award-winning researcher and an ARC Discovery Early Career Research Awardee with the Griffith Criminology Institute. That is a mouthful. Lyndel has more than 15 years experience in leading and managing research projects, and a decade of this has been within senior public policy and research for the Queensland Parliamentary Service. Dr. Bates has research and teaching interests primarily within the policing area, particularly road and transport policing, and she translates her research into policy. And fourth and finally, but not least, is Travis. Travis Cooper is our Manager of Security Intelligence with Queensland Rail. Travis has extensive experience in security, risk and intelligence, counter-terrorism and investigation. Over the past 20 years, Travis has led specialist teams in the Australian Army, the RSPCA Inspectorate and currently with Queensland Rail. He has a professional interest in crime prevention and in particular employee safety and violence elimination. So welcome everyone, thanks for joining us. So before we kick off and I get each of our panelists to speak, which is really what we're here for today, I'll just provide a little bit of background. So in 2018, we at the ARA had feedback from passenger rail CEOs and executives that the issue of antisocial behaviour was becoming an increasing concern for them on their respective networks. So in 2018, we brought industry together and we held an antisocial behaviour workshop. In fact, Gary and Travis both participated in this workshop. It was a 2-day workshop that Sydney Trains hosted, and it brought together rail safety and security experts from across Australia and New Zealand to specifically look at the challenge of antisocial behaviour on and around our networks. What we found was that it's a difficult concept to define, and we didn't have an agreed definition. So at the outset, we set about establishing a definition of what is antisocial behaviour. And in determining that, we really identified that antisocial behaviour is very subjective. It's based on personal perception, and it's also based on an individual's tolerance. So what I view as antisocial behaviour, what our panellists view as antisocial behaviour, and what our participants each view will differ. It obviously makes it challenging to address and a complex issue to deal with. So we agreed on the definition that is displayed on the screen. I won't read it out to you, but essentially what it does is recognise that antisocial behaviour on and around railways might have an impact on the operations of the network, and equally it might have a personal impact on fellow customers or people on and around our rail networks. We also identified 5 key themes that tactics, campaigns and strategies that are developed to address antisocial behaviour can sort of be grouped within. And in our conversations today, I'm pretty sure we'll cover off on those 5 areas. So I'd like to begin by asking each of our panellists to make a bit of an opening statement, to give us a bit of an introduction to antisocial behaviour within their realm. Talk to us about what you're focusing on, what might be some of your current challenges regarding antisocial behaviour, and we'll run in the same order across the screen. So Erin, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. I'd like you to kick us off with a bit of an introduction from you, please.
Thanks, Emma, and thanks ARA for hosting today. So firstly, I just want to provide a bit of an overview of the G-Link service. I'm sure a number of you are aware of who we are, but just to give a bit of an idea of the network and therefore what's on our network would bring some of the issues that we face as well. So Keolis has the contract to operate and maintain G-Link on behalf of TransLink, the government agency in Queensland. So G-Link is a 20-kilometre stretch of track with 19 stations. So at one end, our terminus is joined to Helensvale Heavy Rail. So therefore, we have people coming down from Brisbane and all the other suburbs of Brisbane and connecting through to the light rail in the north. And then we travel all the way down to Broadbeach South, a coastal suburb down near Pacific Fair Shopping Centre. So along our alignment, there are a few things that bring in some of our special people that we have. We have 2 methadone clinics on the network. The main Gold Coast Hospital is on the network, the Southport Courthouse, which also then has the probation office around that area as well, along with 4 key big bus exchange interchanges on this area. The Surfers Paradise Cavill Precinct, which obviously everyone would be aware of, that's your main clubbing area on the Gold Coast. And then a number of large shopping precincts are also along that 20-kilometre stretch. So in my team, I have a team of 29 authorised officers, and they have the power to be able to check tickets, address any certain antisocial behaviour, but they don't have the powers to detain. We also have security officers in our team. They're predominantly keeping an eye on infrastructure and our stations, but also then contribute presence on trams on weekends when we run a full overnight service on the Friday and Saturday nights. So that's mainly our frontline team that is out, and they're the ones that are experiencing the antisocial behaviour on a daily basis. So the main issues that we're experiencing on our system, we've got the more minor things like vandalism, graffiti, burning, tagging, etc. on trams and platforms. Then assaults on passengers and staff, chroming, sniffing glue, which then leads to the excessive spitting because apparently they get a very dry mouth after chroming, and then the threat of violence that we are seeing more and more, and carrying of knives that is happening a few times a week now, that you might spot a knife on someone. So with the areas, like I mentioned before, Cavill, the methadone clinics, the courthouse, that does bring a lot of our repeat offenders into the area who are carrying out that antisocial behaviour normally over and over. And a large portion of those repeat offenders are juveniles as well, which we'll, I'm sure, touch on further into this conversation. So some of the initiatives we're taking in our business, the use of our radios, so man-down functions, having map functions, so when a radio does go off, we can locate our team easily. We do yearly tactical training and conversational management piece, so a big focus on that training is around not getting into the situation and being able to back out and read the signs, so you know, they can retreat before they get into being injured. We review all our body-worn camera footage after any incidents and to have lessons learnt, passing that feedback on to staff. We alert our staff to any persons of interest when we've had any incidents on the network. So all our security team and customer service team in our control room can be an alert to those people and potentially know what they're walking into. Undertaking joint operations with Queensland Police and our TransLink officers as well, though this has dropped off quite a bit during COVID, being that we are in a border town. A lot of our QPS staff have gone to manning the border, so we have seen a big reduction in our joint operations, and therefore we have seen more antisocial behaviour as well because of that. And one other thing is our involvement in a QPS joint initiative called Street Cred, which I'll talk to more a little bit later on, and how that's helping in the juvenile space.
Awesome. Thanks, Erin. Lots of really good context there, and a lot of initiatives and things that we will come back to. Gary, can you give us an introduction from Sydney Trains, please?
Yeah, thanks, Emma. Thanks to everyone who's online. Appreciate the opportunity to do a bit of a catch-up. Online's a little bit different to in person, but we'll keep going with what we're doing, and hopefully this will come across well. I suppose, as Emma said, we worked with, we had a workshop, national workshop a little while back, just to look at antisocial behaviour, and it really is a bit of a complex beast to deal with. And I think our definition ended up being quite a good overview about how we view this. So for us, the definitions, I'll point you to some of the areas of the definition which I find interesting. The first is the one which talks about the operations of train services. And the other one then looks at the issue around how it impacts customers. So for us, we've got a very large network. So we're pre-COVID, we were moving about 1.3 million people per day. During COVID, that's come down to about 560,000 people per weekday, which has been quite good, just simply because we've had less crime, less security incidents, and that may well be the solution to a lot of our crime and security problems. So having said that, it's probably not good for business and growth. So it's something we have to sort of look into the future and just look at how do we better manage a lot of our customers. The big change for us in Sydney Trains over the last few years is we've really changed our focus on managing security incidents, managing train delays, to actually look at the customer. So our key priority at the moment for us is to look at lost customer journey minutes. Now that actually puts a bit of a different dynamic to how we approach security in our business. So for us, I deal with about probably 100,000 requests for assistance each year. We've got about 30,000 security events occur each year on a network, and yet about 3% of that's the bit that actually causes our customers to be delayed, for their journeys to be sort of impacted. So what's interesting about that is you almost need to be able to put 60% of your time in terms of trying to understand what are those driving elements that are causing our customers to be delayed and impacting their journey, and then try and find a balance between that to looking at those things that make our customers feel unsafe, and just don't make it as though they don't have a safe journey. So it's been a really interesting approach. We've had to sort of look at revisiting what we do in the last 12 months, and for us, I guess where we've achieved a lot of our success, and Travis will talk about this a bit later on, is having a really good intelligence framework around what data do we collect, how do we analyse that data, how do we really try and answer the bit of that so what factor, because that's really important for us, because if you understand what's actually carrying out the network, what's affecting your customers, more than just some high-level commentary around the normal stats that you get, it then helps to develop your various strategies. And for us, I'm quite envious in terms of Erin having access to all the authorised officers and the various resources. We've got a slightly different operating model in New South Wales, where we're predominantly reliant on the Police Transport Command to be able to put boots on the ground to influence a lot of the sort of customer behaviour and those sort of things. So for us, antisocial behaviour is a very interesting concept, because the things that cause our trains and our customers to be delayed are just sometimes people don't like each other on the trains, get into arguments, and they're not traditional focuses for the police. So for us, our we have to have quite an mature intelligence model to be able to understand what that is, be able to provide some trends, identify your hot spots, and then be able to work closely with the police in terms of where can we deploy the police to have sort of the biggest impact and try and prevent a lot of this stuff. And then beyond that, other initiatives we've included in the past is to deal with better communications to the customers, trying to explain to customers how their behaviour affects the other customers and their journey times and the like. So yeah, so I think when I end up getting to my area for discussion, we'll focus more in the space of crime management and graffiti management, but the principles we applied across the various elements of and the various categories of security sort of are quite applicable, whether it be suicide prevention, graffiti management, or managing antisocial behaviour. So thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Gary. Dr. Lyndel, over to you, please.
Thank you very much, Emma. So obviously, the rest of the panel are practitioners, and I come from a research background. So I'll be talking about the research in the space. And one of the big challenges is there isn't actually a lot of peer-reviewed research out there that looks at these particular issues. And certainly touching on the definition issues that other people have raised, antisocial behaviour is, I suppose, broader than crime. It's not just criminal activity, but antisocial. But, there has been some work done probably about 10 years ago now in Britain that suggested if we were able to resolve some of the public concerns about antisocial behaviour on public transport, you'd probably increase the number of trips by about 11%. So antisocial behaviour does discourage people from taking trips on transport. And for additionally, they talked to 1,000 users of public transport in London. They asked the passengers what they considered as antisocial behaviour. And when they listed them in the research from most unacceptable, they started with things like shouting or swearing at the driver, and then shouting or swearing at other passengers. Then it was fare evasion, people smoking on public transport, spitting was in there as well, dropping litter, or being drunk on public transport, not vacating a priority seat, taking up one seat, or playing their music too loudly, or talking on their phone too loudly. So when you talk to users of public transport, I suppose the things that they consider antisocial behaviour are what I would consider more minor than, say, assaults on staff. But they also found that it was the frequency with which they were exposed to these types of behaviours that were a major issue. So passengers were quite able to manage people smoking or spitting, if they only say once or twice. But if they were exposed to it repeatedly, that's when it started to have a big impact on their perceptions of transport and antisocial behaviour. So when it comes to designing interventions, I suppose there's a number of ways that you could look at measures to combat these types of behaviours. So there are the enforcement type of measures, so you can increase police officers or authorised officers travelling on the network. And then another popular method is using environmental design measures, so increasing the use of closed-circuit television, improving designs in the layout and the lighting of train stations, for instance. And one way that, or one methodology that's used to develop interventions, not just in this space, but more broadly, is to use what they call the problem-solving policing approach, or POP. And so that's got 4 steps. And so the first step is where you scan or you gather information about the identified problem, then you analyse it and identify what the key issue is that you want to deal with. And then you have a response where you develop and implement specific policies. And then you carry out an assessment or an evaluation where you assess how effective it is. You can always go back to the analysis stage if there's more issues. Hopefully that fits with what Travis is going to say about intelligence.
Brilliant. Well, over to you, Travis.
Thanks, Emma. And I'd just like to say that I'm humbled to be included in this panel because I know my team are looking at this and thinking, Travis, an expert. It's not the case. So I guess in the Queensland Rail context, and I've listened to you guys define how you individually in your context define antisocial behaviour, and we're sort of along the same line. So I won't really touch on that just at the moment, but from our perspective, we've got a very low appetite for any risk that has the real potential to bring harm to its employees and customers, and including our assets and operations too, because there are elements of antisocial behaviour that does target that. But we see antisocial behaviour as a gateway and a lead indicator to other more serious crime / threats, such as offences against the person. And that obviously has vast consequential impacts for us, ranging from personal safety to reputational to operational. So the challenges for us, as they are for all operators, is the fact that antisocial behaviour is largely a social or societal issue. And I know I'm sort of looking forward to Dr. Bates talking more on this, but I guess from what drives that, there are so many factors that can range from like socioeconomic, interpersonal, developmental, contributors such as alcohol, drug, and volatile substance misuse, which we see a lot. There are the perceptional issues associated with antisocial behaviour, which influence antisocial behaviour. It can be environmental. So some of these we obviously have direct control over, but most of these we don't. So we understand that there's a real need for us to broadly engage, develop and foster relationships and partnerships with key agencies and other stakeholders to tackle the issue collaboratively, for mutual benefit and the most effective results. So the challenges for us are around, and these are opportunities as well, is around maintaining partnerships, aligning those joint intents, and ensuring that we're all playing together under I guess a consistent framework that works for everyone, instead of trying to deal with antisocial behaviour in isolation.
Travis, I'd like to flesh that out a little bit more. You spoke about the importance of partnerships and collaboration. So Queensland Rail, I believe, is the only Australian rail operator that has its own police force. And you work very closely, albeit other operators, of course, work closely with the police as well. But you guys are sort of embedded together. And I understand you recently established a Queensland Police Service outpost at Northgate Station, and the aim of that was to reduce the risk. Northgate, thank you, not a Queenslander. The aim was to reduce the risk of crime on the Northern Rail network by having a heightened police presence. So I'd be really keen to hear a bit more about that, but how QR collaborates with the police and some of the results you've achieved by doing that.
Yeah, sure. So as I briefly mentioned, I don't know whether I did mention actually, we operate under a memorandum of understanding. So we have a formal partnership and a framework for how we, I guess, jointly operate with Queensland Police. And while we don't have directive control over QPS Railway Squad, we work mutually to achieve a common objective of reducing crime on the network, and also, creating a safe environment for our employees and customers. So the 80-strong QPS Railway Squad operate out of 8 outposts, including Northgate. And I guess it's probably prudent of me to talk more on the broader, network rather than just focusing on Northgate, because it's a new outpost. But each is, strategically located around the network to give us best coverage and effect better response and proactive presence for QPS. And, Northgate being our most recent build, it's situated at a junction station, like many of the others. But we also have a mobile police facility, which is essentially a large van. It acts as a processing unit on wheels. And so that is proactively deployed in support of operations and as well, support and in support of engagement activities that we do that aren't necessarily enforcement based. As an example of the coverage of enforcement operations we undertake with QPS, over the last 12 months, we've performed over 600 operations across the network. and that had a total of just over 4,000 persons charged, with over 9,000 charges. So that included people intercepted on the rail network in relation to, I guess, community-based offences, but it also highlights how the partnership also contributes to broader community safety. And as part of that, we had almost 20,000 street checks being conducted by Railway Squad. And that provides us sort of valuable intelligence in terms of, persons of interest using the network. And noting that ASB, or antisocial behaviour, is sometimes the catalyst for street checks, or most of the time it's a catalyst for street checks. So it's a gateway for police to provide a little bit more intervention and get more information from people. And I guess while I've got the opportunity, I can talk on a few key initiatives that are current for us that we jointly conduct with QPS Railway Squad. So one of interest is a co-deployment model that we've established with Railway Squad and TED NOFs, which is a street university. So they have some youth counsellors that patrol with our QPS at select hotspot locations on the network where we have, I guess, currently experience substance-driven issues such as alcohol, drugs, and volatile substance misuse, and largely that's with juveniles, and also because we see that as being a key driver of ASB. So the aim of that operating model is not based on enforcement. It's basically to engage with those at-risk youth with a focus on volatile substance misuse and refer them to programs and services off the network to try and address, I guess, the root cause of the issue, not just the symptoms. So we conducted that pilot in May, and since we've had 18 successful referrals just out of 2 locations that we've operated from. So that's one, I guess, successful or tangibly successful initiative. Obviously, as part of the joint intelligence framework, sharing of information on persons of interest is vital for us, and we can now do that through the provision of person of interest flyers and bolos, or be on the lookout for flyers for recidivist offenders, and we send those out to monitoring staff and our frontline. And I guess without that partnership, we'd sort of be, I think, in contravention of privacy law through doing that. So, that has opened the door for us to openly share more confidential information for better outcomes. Our analysts work with youth justice department, and they attend conferencing, and they offer victim impact statements for better restorative justice outcomes. We've got QPS delivery of vulnerable person training to our authorised officers. So this enables, I guess, a better understanding and ability to deal with persons who are impaired. So impaired either through mental health or external factors such as drugs and alcohol. So this has also been complemented through training and education to our staff on volatile substance misuse and the risks when engaging with persons under the influence. And I guess the last one that I wanted to reinforce was our community engagement, which I think is our unsung hero and probably has best bang for buck. And I know a person who is key to this. So Dave Millwood, who's our community education and engagement coordinator, he's online at the moment. So hello, Dave. He manages the community engagement program, and we work very closely with Dave. So Dave, I guess it's a bit of a triangle of cooperation between ourselves, Dave and his team, and the QPS Railway Squad through the Crime Prevention Officer. So between us, it's an intelligence-led program in a lot of ways, but Dave visits schools, alternate learning centres, and other similar facilities, program providers, to educate a lot of our offending and victim demographics, so youths and students. And so he provides rail safety education, but also incorporates and gives a heavy slant on incorporating, I guess, appropriate behaviour on the network. So I guess with the Crime Prevention Officer goes along as well, and they provide more reinforcement around, or give more enforcement around that perspective. So we recently rolled out an electrical safety campaign. So I don't know whether hopefully most people online would be familiar with our High Voltage Can Jump campaign. And Dave's been visiting schools recently to continue to deliver that message. And it also, I guess, centres around the youth sneaker culture. But Queensland Rail is, interestingly, we've enlisted some notable ambassadors to help deliver the message, which has been very effective. So Lissy, which is an Aussie or South Pacific Islander rapper, he's been presenting and performing with Dave recently at some schools, and the reception's been phenomenal from both the target audience, but also reinforced by the parents through feedback that we received. So we understand that, you know, this type of engagement is substantially effective in shaping the hearts and minds, I guess, and influencing changes in behaviour. And as I said, yeah, the engagement program, it's intelligence-led, and Dave does a fantastic job. So I guess I just want to give you that shout out to Dave.
Shout out to Dave, and obviously a hell of a lot happening within the QR program and working really closely with QPS. So thanks for the very broad update, Travis. And you talked about juveniles, and so Erin, I'd like to come to you from a Gold Coast sort of perspective. What's happening within the space for antisocial behaviour specific to juveniles? Travis talked about, you know, engaging at-risk youth. Can you talk to us about what you're doing on the Gold Coast in that space?
Yeah, there's definitely strong precedence with juveniles in that they are our main offenders in this space. Last year there was a fatal stabbing in Surfers Paradise, and the offender and victim both travelled in on the tram. So the papers then obviously went to town that the tram's not safe and put it all on the tram. However, you know, offenders had travelled in from outside of the Gold Coast through other modes of transport, and they just happened to get on the tram and get here. So, you know, what are we doing in this space? Everything we can, but it's a unique one, and Travis touched on the societal issue that comes with this, is that they know that there's not many repercussions when they do something as well. They get warned and warned and warned. To give an example, one of our gifts recently got she's banned from the light rail. So police advised us she was banned from light rail. However, when we called them to let them know that she was on the light rail, they said, well, we can't actually do anything. We just make a note of it that she breached her bail conditions. So for us, it's very difficult in this space to do anything because you address and you call in the same behaviours and it just happens the same day, the next day and the next day and the next day. So one different technique we are trying to take is working with their street cred program and build relationships with some of the juveniles who are at risk, similar to probably what Travis was saying with QR. So street cred works with youth justice, arts, housing. Now I'm trying to think of all the other bodies that are involved, and they actually go and visit the parks, the areas around our network, the areas where they're sleeping at night, and engage with these youth. So we've got a few of our team involved in that program too, because they are using the light rail to get to and from. So the police like that we interact with them to see where they're at, and we can kind of track what they're up to as well when we have interactions with them. So by us engaging, we're building relationships with a number of these youth. They then, you know their buddy that comes and visits them on whatever Thursday night we go out and do this program. So when we see them on the light rail, we've got that relationship. It has improved with those who we have built those relationships with, that they're a little bit more respectful to our staff. You know, they ask for that specific person. Hey, is John here today? I know John from Street Cred. And then we try and help educate them to, you know, not do the graffiti and all those other little things that they do in that space. So it has been successful. It was put on hold during COVID and it's just starting back up again. But this is just one small thing we are doing in that space. But the issue is obviously much greater than just the little Gold Coast network. It's happening everywhere. You know, we're seeing the juveniles just openly wearing knives hanging off their belt buckles, and they're not scared to hide them. We see them in interactions then just open up their bag or their pocket to show that they've got that knife there, just to kind of let them know that, look what I've got. We haven't had them use them on our staff, but very often it's just kind of that look at me, but they're there, and history would show they're not scared to use it as well, and a number of them have been. So the other thing in that space we're seeing is that our older passengers feel that they should have the respect of the juveniles. So quite often they'll go up and start pulling them up on something. Can you stop smelling that or stop smoking that? And they think that the youth will listen to them because they're older and that they should have respect. So that's quite often where we're seeing the PACS assaults, where the juveniles have potentially been chroming. They're high on whatever they're doing, someone gets in their space, and that's when the passenger is spat on, pushed, shoved, whatever. So I'd love to do a campaign around educating the public on how to handle that situation, but if we just go and do an education campaign in that space, does it look like that issue is just with the trams again, where it's something that we all need to be involved in? Because I think that education to the other travelling passengers is something that is missing. Where do you go? How do you get help? What do you do in that space? Don't use the help button that's right next to those juveniles, because they hear you ringing and telling someone, or say call the police, and they react very quickly to that. So yeah, I have seen some assaults where some very young kids have hurt some of our older passengers, and yeah, it's very sad to see.
Lyndel, if we jump to sort of a research perspective, continuing the juvenile theme, what drives antisocial behaviour in youth? How do we sort of, understand it from a research perspective? We can't hear you, Lyndel. No, okay. I'll get Cindy and our back end, our tech wizard, to work her magic. Gary, we'll come to you whilst we work out Lyndel's tech. There's been some comments by Travis and Erin about antisocial behaviour being a bit of a gateway to more serious crime. You mentioned in your opening statement that you are focused on crime prevention. Can you talk to us about what Sydney Trains is doing in that crime prevention space?
Yes, unless Lyndel's back, are you back? No, okay, no, I thought I heard her speak. So in terms of, I suppose, our approach to crime prevention, we've employed the traditional models around crime prevention through environmental design. We employ the 5E model, where you look at your enabling, your education, engineering, and your enforcement and your evaluation when it comes to, I suppose, understanding your crime problem. So a lot of I think one thing we do very well across the rail industry is we work very closely.
I don't think
a lot of our partners. Can you hear me, Emma?
I can hear you, Gary.
Yeah, good, excellent. So we work very closely with a lot of our interstate partners. So we are sharing a lot of ideas, and Travis sort of highlighted a number of these things. And for us, we don't necessarily have a direct access to our a security workforce per se. But so what we ended up doing, we end up sort of building a lot of that space and that enabling element around having joint transport intelligence groups with us and the police and the other transport operators within Sydney and New South Wales. We design a lot of our stations, so using crime prevention principles, improved lighting, CCTV, open, clean environments, capable guardianship is another key thing. We looked at designing a lot of our infrastructure, so it's good defence in depth. Obviously, the idea is to try and prevent, or if not deter and delay, crime that does occur. We partner, and particularly with antisocial behaviour, what I find is interesting in the discussion so far is, yes, there is a bit of an element around youth and causing antisocial behaviour, and I sort of discussed this a little bit earlier, the difference between our broader antisocial behaviour challenges and the ones that affect the customers and their travel time. So for us, we see a lot more of the adults affecting that side of the main sort of causes to antisocial behaviour, whereas like Erin and like Travis, we still have that broader issue with youths and we rely on our skills education program and community strategies to engage various groups. So, but when it comes to sort of more the adult side of things, there's the partnerships we've got to develop across government. So for us, New South Wales Community and Justice, working with homelessness teams to try and keep our environments clean and try and care and look after our customers and the people in that periphery of the various railway stations. And I guess, and Travis talked about this importance of having a really good intelligence function is, and for us, we've got over 10,000 CCTV cameras, great passive intelligence system out there, but it's only useful if you use it. So we recently had an incident where we had someone pointing a laser light at a train driver. Sort of within 24 hours, I had my intel team pull down the CCTV, pull together an intelligence brief, handed it over to the police, and within that sort of 24-hour period, they turned up the following day, met the same person at the railway station, arrested him and charged him, and ended up putting him into jail overnight. So a fairly good result. So what you're seeing here is, whenever we look at this complex problem of antisocial behaviour, that behaviour which is very closely aligned to crime, I think we have a very good mature model across Australia, and I know definitely dealing with the Victorians and the Queenslands and the guys in Perth works very well. When it comes to those more complex behaviours that are less crime, that's where it's a bit of a challenge, and I think that's where it's important for us to be able to work with the community groups, because they've got the capabilities, they've got the resources and the people available can help us, because we're obviously rail operators, but we're dealing with, as I just said, with homelessness, very complex challenges. We're probably not best, we don't have the best capability to deal with it, but if we partner with the respective government agencies, they can have programs, we can access those programs, they can look at managing a lot of these individuals on a long-term basis, and I think it's us being able to identifying how that's causing our customers challenges, and then how do we partner it, and what sort of things we can put in place to try and sort of mitigate the impact on our network.
I think partnership is certainly coming up as a common theme. I mean, each of you have mentioned the importance of collaboration and partnerships. We appear to have lost Lyndel, but perhaps she's dialing out and back in again. Erin, in your opening statement, you sort of, in providing your introduction to the network and the context, you mentioned a number of sort of, I guess, hotspots or areas that are located near the railway, sort of Methadone Clinic, the courthouse, etc. How do you partner with entities like that to, I guess, address the issues of antisocial behaviour on and around the Gold Coast network?
I can't say we've partnered with those specific entities themselves, but they're areas when we are doing our operations and planning things with QPS that's where we focus on. So prior to COVID, we knew what were the court dates for juveniles. You know, Tuesday is normally court day or whatever day it was. So we used to plan a number of our operations to be around that area and do loops and have all our presence with QPS and us in that space. So just being strategic in where we're putting people, seeing any repeat issues that are coming up, and targeting those specific areas.
Yeah, which makes sense, helping it to guide your strategies. Travis, there's been mention about the importance of data or specifically intelligence, and you made mention of this before. And so QR really focuses on using data. Gary talked about data and the importance of using that to guide decisions. Can you talk to us about QR's intelligence framework and how that fits within your antisocial behaviour or your crime prevention program?
Yeah, sure. So I guess, trying not to duplicate what Gary had emphasised, so security intelligence is a key driver of security risk management strategies for us, from the immediate short term to the longer term. And for those who have been across our security risk management framework, Queensland Rail provides a platform called SIMS, or a Security Information Management System. So that enables all employees, in particular our frontline, to record security incident information. And that information is then analysed daily by my team. And from that analysis, we can identify emerging or current trends and recommend initiatives to mitigate those threats and risks. So they can range from enforcement activities, education and engagement, which I've spoken on, security technology installations, environmental changes over the short and long term. So I guess pivotal to our successful intelligence-led framework is the partnership under the MOU, which I discussed. And you know, part of that MOU allows for open sharing and collaboration on intelligence through the formation of our joint intelligence function. So over the past 5 years, this has really matured significantly, achieving, I guess, an almost seamless approach to information sharing to benefit protective security for Queensland Rail. So most intelligence products that we provide are jointly developed, and they use information from both our own data, but also crime data that's maintained by QPS. And that partnership sort of enhances the validity and the integrity of the information. So it takes away some of that subjectivity. Should it be only sort of, I guess, sourced from one source? And there are a number of forums that we've established and reports, I guess, that we host and develop to plan our security operations and other more holistic, I guess, initiatives over the short and the long term as well.
Travis, I just want to stay with you quickly. We had a question come through, and it was in relation to your conversation or your comments around your collaboration with Queensland Police. We've had a question about, have there been any demonstrable improvements to the impact of antisocial behaviour on performance? That is, have there been any direct positive impacts on the reliability and delivery as a result of directly positioned police officers on your network?
In terms of, so I guess the key measure of that would be OTR, and the impact of security incidents on OTR. And we obviously measure that month in, month out, well, daily, to be honest. I would have to come back. I can't think off the top of my head what the actual, statistics and data say. Apologies, but I will definitely, I'll be able to give that information post this forum to address that question.
And look, we circulate a post-webinar link and a survey, so we can include your response there if that works. One of the areas that's obviously really significant within the issue of antisocial behaviour is staff safety and staff assault. We haven't really touched on that yet, but Erin, in Queensland recently, the Queensland Sentencing Advisory Council undertook a review of Section 340, which was essentially looking at the current penalties and sentencing trends for assaults against police officers, corrective services officers, and other public officers. The ARA was involved, and QR and KD on the Gold Coast were also involved, and we were advocating into the review process that public transport workers should also be included, and they deserve to go to work and do their job and be safe. Can you elaborate on the issue of staff safety and assault and the importance of addressing this from a KD perspective?
Yeah, definitely. It's really important. I don't want any of my team coming to work feeling like, what's going to happen tonight? Am I going to be injured? Am I going home safely? And even, being spat on, something like that, what they have to go through then for the period of however many months it is, 6 months, to have the tests done. And that's always playing in the back of your mind. Is this test going to come back clear? I've not had to experience that, but a number of my staff have been through that testing process and worrying about the results of what that test would be. Wouldn't be nice. So my priority is to my team to make sure that they are safe. So this change and hopeful change that's going to come through legislation is fantastic. I think it would be great for staff to see that if someone does do that to them, that there is tougher penalties and they're going to have bigger consequences for carrying out those actions. Do I think that change is going to stop the incidents from happening? Probably not. There still has to be a whole lot more work done. The antisocial behaviour is still going to be there. It's just that the consequences might be bigger. So, the normal person, an everyday person, might think twice about doing that, but the general people who are carrying out these behaviours aren't going to think of the consequences at the time of doing it, unfortunately. So our focus for our staff, I mentioned earlier, is on the training that we provide them. So I don't want the frontline staff, and we have a control centre. They deploy staff if there is an issue, but if the staff are going into an issue that their safety is at risk, I don't want them going to that incident either. The first step should be the control room calling QPS and not our authorised officers walking into that situation. It should be a call straight to QBS. However, if they do find themselves in that situation, then that comes down to their tactical training and stepping back and using conversational management to remove themselves. Quite often the uniform is the thing that's triggering that person to be more aggressive. So they need to step out and make the choice to step away from it, to put their safety first and step back and call QPS. The other thing we're just about to start rolling out to, we've been doing it, but putting a bit more of a push on it, is our control room staff going out and spending time in the field as well. So seeing things from a control room and through the cameras isn't the same perspective as actually experiencing that and having the person in your face at that point in time. So we really want all our control room staff to feel what that's like and have an understanding of what's going on out in the field. And if the field staff can't give you all the information you need at that point in time because they're dealing with that person who's in their face, the control room, having that understanding and realising how they can help the situation as well. So that's just a couple of areas. Focus in the next couple of months is to build that relationship so the field staff also feel supported from the back end as well with the control room.
That's great. It makes sense.
Emma,
Gary.
Yeah, can I just add a bit more to Erin's observations and to do with staff violence? I think that some of the success we've had in our organisation is there's two elements. One is the again, I keep reiterating this value of the intelligence. So explaining to staff you had X number of assaults doesn't really mean anything, but to provide them that intelligence says where you're most likely to be assaulted, and say for our train crew, for instance, about 80% of the occasions where they're spat on is typically as they're in the crew cab, as the train departs. That's probably the real difference between just the intelligence and talking stats, because we're then able to sort of brief our staff to say, when you're performing this type of activity, when you're moving through this part of the station, this is where your increased times are for risks, and that makes them, provides a bit more situational awareness. They can then sort of better anticipate when things are going to happen, and that we're actually seeing that's actually seeing a bit of a slight reduction in terms of, say, spitting. This is pre-COVID, mind you, because what's happened during COVID, everyone's reported a lot more spitting incidents, just because they're more aware of or more conscious of that sort of stuff. But the second part that's helped with us too is better engagement of the legal system and the police. So when it comes to following up on staff assaults, working close to the police, providing the staff support as they go through the legal process, and then communicating the success that comes out through the courts is really important. Travis might cover off with his intel aspect, but one of the key features around intelligence is the circle, and providing feedback or an outcome to the intelligence provide drives more collection and provision of intelligence. So for us, we're seeing the courts taking a stronger stance around sentencing of people, keeping them in jail overnight. I think that the best sentence I've seen in the last sort of 12, 18, or maybe 2 years is there's a train guard who had someone threw a coin or a rocket, hit him in the head, and the person got 3 or 4 years in jail. So going back to our staff and saying, if you work through the process, if you have your security team follow up and provide them the support, give them the advice, because they tend to be on their own as victims, even though the police are there just helping you through the process. That drives a lot more reporting. It also provides a little confidence to your staff that we are actually here to support you, and we are providing that confidence to work through the process. And we're also helping to advocate on behalf of our staff to the judiciary that this is a problem for us, and we need you to take a stronger stance, just not allowing us being a part of the process. So that putting a bit of a human face to what's happening in our environment and in our organisation is really important, just from the court dynamics and how do you sort of influence. And I'll take that view. If you have a problem in your network and you don't bother turning up to court, how would you expect the magistrate or judge to sort of take your concern seriously? But if you're there and they've got to sort of face you, they've got to face you, you've got to face them, it seems to have a much better outcome in terms of the court process. Yeah.
Gary, that's fantastic. You've actually just answered one of our questions that's come through, which is about how do you keep your staff engaged in writing their reports if they're not seeing outcomes. So it's really about communicating the outcomes that you are achieving so they realise that it is worthwhile. Travis, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I was going to say, and this is a, I know Stephen, my security intelligence team leader, is listening in with the team, but a shout out to him. So he came up with an initiative which sort of harnesses that culture and encourages that culture with reporting. And so we have I guess, a formal feedback loop with our employees. So where the guys identify a job well done, for instance.
Have you guys lost Travis?
Present, Travis.
One in, one out. Lyndel, you're back.
I am back. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Sorry. Hopefully, Travis's connection will reconnect. So, Lyndel, we've moved away from the conversation around the juvenile aspect, but with all your research, can you talk to us about some of the international intervention strategies that might be broader than engaging police specifically? What are some of the broader areas that people look to?
Sure, Emma, happy to talk about that. And as I said earlier, one of the big weaknesses in this area is there isn't a lot of published research done. And I see that Gary's co-authored something recently, so hopefully everybody else can co-author and publish what they're doing as well, because it sounds very interesting. There was a campaign in London about 12 years ago now called Consider It Traveller campaign. And it was trying to change the attitudes of people who use trains through the use of education and a media campaign. So they used a poster, film and an internet campaign, and they used the voice of a reasonable person to remind people that public transport's a shared space and that they need to reflect on their own behaviour. It was deliberately designed so that it wasn't authoritarian and that it was non-hectoring. So they deliberately didn't use the traditional style of posters and things that you see on public transport. It was also accompanied by an increase in policing and enforcement activities. So it does make it a little difficult for us to know what was due to the increase in policing and enforcement and what was due to the campaign. But they did evaluate their campaign by surveying 700 people, and they surveyed these people 3 times, so before the campaign and after the campaign. And the survey suggested that 48% of Londoners were able to recognise the campaign, which is a really good outcome in terms of market research terms, and that there was a 5% increase in the number of people that recognised that perhaps they were behaving in an antisocial way on public transport and that they needed to change their own behaviour. And it seems to have the biggest impact on 18 to 34-year-olds, so young adults, as opposed to, say, juveniles or those who are a bit older. So that's something that's happened in London. Did that answer your question, Emma?
Yeah, no, it did. And we've had some queries. We sort of focused a lot on the police and security aspect, and so there was some interest in looking at it more broadly. We're almost out of time, so I guess I'll just throw to each of you and super quickly, number one priority for sort of the next 12 months within antisocial behaviour, what are you going to be doing? Erin?
I would think getting our police presence back and just working together with them.
Brilliant. Gary?
For me, it's about our customer journey time. So it's what can we put in place to better manage that 3% of our security incidents which affect our customers. So how do we manage customer behaviour and keep the network going at the same time?
And Lyndel, you've mentioned research is limited. What would you like to research?
So I would like to have a look at juvenile fare evasion, if I want to be really specific, juvenile fare evasion, and perhaps some of the reasons why they're evading fares, and then looking at some of the interventions that we can use that don't rely necessarily on police enforcement. And I'm thinking around here using frameworks such as procedural justice and maybe getting some parents involved. I don't know. That's what I want to do.
No, that's brilliant. And I'm sure there's a lot of people on the line that would be really interested in what the outcomes of that would be. And I'm sure Erin and Gary could put it to good use. Look, thank you to the 3 of you for joining us. Unfortunately, Travis has messaged to say his laptop died, that we're having trouble getting him back online. The joys of technology. Look, I think we've really covered off the fact that antisocial behaviour is a complex, evolving social challenge that we're all sort of dealing with. We've touched on, the importance of research, that there isn't enough, but there's obviously opportunities to do a lot more. We've touched on the importance of keeping our staff safe, the importance of collaboration and partnerships. We've talked in detail about a number of those with police, some of the intervention strategies that you've got in addressing crime prevention, some of the campaigns that you're either doing or would like to do, the importance of data and intelligence to drive your decisions so that you focus your resourcing, and also the importance of that feedback loop so that you are engaging your staff and they are seeing that their work and their effort is worthwhile. I'd like to thank the three of you for joining us, and Travis in his absence from the screen. It's certainly been really interesting. I've found it really interesting. We will circulate a link to the video recording to everybody that is on the line. We'll also circulate a survey for people to provide their feedback. And we've got another webinar planned for next week where we're actually launching the research from a Deloitte piece of work we have done, which is looking at the value of rail. So it's a really interesting piece of work. It looks at the different sectors of the industry, so passenger rail, freight rail, looks at some of the benefits of rail, environmental, congestion, all of those sorts of facts and figures that we can really use to promote the broader benefits of our industry. So I encourage you to register and join us for that on Monday. It should be a really interesting session, and we will continue to run our webinar program for you all, and we thank Browsher for their continued support to make that happen. So thank you, Erin, Gary, Lyndel, and of course, Travis, for your input and expertise today, and I wish everyone a safe afternoon.
Thanks, Emma.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Emma.
Appreciate it.